Hi there, I'm Michaela with Michaela's Counseling. I had a counselor years back of my own, and he and I ran into a disagreement about what would happen as I would come to sessions. I would bring up whatever I brought up, and he kept intervening in a particular way. And he had a very particular theory on how therapy was supposed to proceed. And he'd taken a training in this technique, and what started happening was that we were missing each other. And what I noticed was that when I brought it up with him, he would say to me, "Well, Michaela, yeah, I hear that you're disagreeing. Let me explain to you more about the theory. And let me tell you, this is research validated. I can send you some research articles, and you'll see over time if you read the research that I'm right." So there's so much more backstory to that, and actually reading the research and actually having some very different ideas what that meant from what he did. But it really, I think it's experiences like that that's part of what's made me so aware as a therapist, that when a client and I seem to be disagreeing, or I seem to be missing something, there's more than one thing that we can do about that and that we need to do about that. And it's not just about explaining my theory. So I went to a training that was actually a little similar to the training this therapist went to. It had a lot of merits, the thing that he was doing. And so when I went to this training, though, I started doing a little bit of the same thing he was doing with my clients, where I was just so excited about the implications of what I was learning that I wanted to bring it to all my clients. And I ended up having a lot of discussions with them, a week or two after kind of the rush from the training had worn off, to really talk about what it was like to have me come into sessions and be so excited that sometimes I was missing their cues for a little bit. So I want to talk about a few different things that can be done when a therapist and a client seem to be at an impasse, and maybe there is a difference of opinion on approach, or something doesn't seem to be clicking. So one thing that I find as a therapist these days is that I very rarely, if ever, actually assert more about my theory or why it is that I'm doing what I'm doing right in the beginning, when a client brings up a disagreement, or if I look at them and their facial expression looks hurt, or it looks like they pulled back, or they sound kind of angry or snappish. Where I'm going to go is I'm actually going to back up a little bit and find out what's happening for them. I'm going to say, I missed something, didn't I? Or, oh, there was some part that I didn't understand. That didn't ring true. Whatever it is, I'm going to say something that's going to let them know that I'm seeing that we're not really clicking at the moment. They're not clicking with what I said. And what I want from that, and what usually happens, is that they come back to engaging with me. I'm getting it, at least that I didn't get it a minute ago, and they clarify and they say, "Well, no, it wasn't really that," or, "No, I didn't really want that kind of tool, because what I really wanted to communicate was this." And I go, "Oh, okay, that's really important. So here's where you were." And so let's say that I'm coming in with a model on some way to work with things, and the client and I disagree on how to do it. So one really common example is a client who's been through a lot of trauma, and they want to come in and they want to rehash their most difficult memories, because they've learned that talking them out is the most helpful thing that they can do for their healing. So I've gotten training in working with trauma, and have a map that says that actually there are certain things that we want to look for as people are talking about trauma, and there might be some things that we want to do first before we dive into the story, so that the client doesn't feel more vulnerable than when they started, and so that they're not accidentally re-traumatizing themselves. And so there's some ways that I'm going to try and back things up. And what's difficult about that is often people who've been through really hard situations, it wasn't just the hard situation. It was that they were invalidated. It was that there was nobody there to acknowledge that was horrific. And what a shock, and how sad, and how horrible. And so I think part of where the impasse comes in with this kind of thing, where a client wants to discuss trauma, the therapist wants to help them get some tools for stability, is that we can accidentally repeat the dynamic where the client is talking about something really difficult, and then not only are they remembering the difficult experience, now they're feeling that we're not hearing them, and it reminds them of, all the other people maybe that didn't hear them. And so it's delicate. And this is a big part of why I don't assert theory, but I actually want to find out what the experience is like for the client. So if a client says to me, I wanted to tell you my story, I say, I know. And that story is so important. And let's just sit with, you really want me to hear this, and I want to hear it too. I really do. And there are some things that I want to talk with you about first because I'm concerned about, some different pieces that can come up when you're sharing your story. But I want to hear it, and I also want to know what's going on for you when I cut you off, or when I direct your attention somewhere else. Like, how can we do this in a way that isn't so jarring? And how do we make sure that you really feel understood, and that, you're communicating, you're in pain. I'm getting that you're in pain, and you're wanting to share the stories, and I'm wanting to help you have some tools so that as you share the story, there's something different from reliving the trauma. And so one thing that tends to be really good is just talking about the misunderstanding and how that's registering. And sometimes clients will say surprising things and really perceptive things. Like, I've had clients say, "Well, Michaela, I mean, I get your theory, or I get what you're doing, but I didn't like your pacing right there was a little off." And I go, "Yeah, I look back to what you were saying, and you're right. I got overeager in that moment to introduce what I was saying." Or they say, "But your tonality was a little bit clipped in a way that I found kind of jarring." And I go, "Oh." So really, really noticing those moments can actually be therapeutic in itself. And so one thing that I've learned is that very often it is about the misunderstanding itself. I do want us to talk about, I have a lot of really brainy clients, and they want to know the theories, and they want to know something about what we're doing and why. And I love having those conversations. And I've also found that it's really important to really track with, so you felt misunderstood, and what happened right there. And what can we do in this moment to answer any questions that you might be having, or to really, really address that concern? Because the concern isn't really, well, you have a theory that's more like this, and I have a theory that's more like this, and mine is more based in. It's not really that intellectual. What's often happening is that there is maybe like a really tender part, or a young part of a client, or even like a really, really cool part that's just feeling unheard. They said something, and it's not just about the story, it's not just about their words. It's that we miscalibrated on something that could feel like a deeper level than a level of theory. And so what's really, really cool about working this way is that when we work with the impact of kind of the disruption and the flow between us, that actually helps with a whole bunch of stuff. It helps with relationships, it helps with conflicts, it helps with having a map for ways to resolve stuff like this in the future. And it also gives what may have been a missing experience. I think a lot of us growing up maybe didn't have parents that could get down on our levels and say, I was wrong, or, I was really harsh right there, and I was impatient, and it wasn't your fault, or, whatever it is. We've all, no matter how great our childhoods were, had parents that missed us sometimes. And so if you haven't had the experience of that kind of repair, it doesn't really, really matter how good your therapist's theory is, or how sound their thinking is, and how they're working with you. There's something very important about noticing when the flow is broken in the relationship, and tending to that. And then my clients and I find that we have a really easy time discussing research from there, because now they're not feeling like wounded, they're not feeling like they're in retreat, and they're not feeling like they can't be themselves with me. And so then we can have a lively intellectual discussion. Then we can talk about, well, I mean, what does happen in you if I take this kind of approach? Here's what I'm hoping is happening, and it looks like what actually happened was this. And they go, well, yeah, because I thought this, or, well, a few minutes ago I felt really bad about it, but now that you explain it, I actually understand it. So can you just preface it next time? And we're off to the races. And so This video got a little bit diffuse. It's right around 10 minutes at this point, but I wanted to talk a little bit about how I, as a therapist, have learned to navigate disagreements, because I'm just looking back on my old therapies and then having clients talk with me about a contrast in how I seem to work with how other therapists seem to work. It occurs to me that I don't think everyone learns how to do this, and I think it took me really time and a diverse set of experiences to learn this way of doing it. I still don't get it right every time, not nearly, but it's something that I keep finding is so, so important to track with the client's experience of what's happening, and to really tend to the relationship, and not just the content between us. Thank you. If you'd like more tips or information like this, subscribe to my YouTube channel if this video was helpful, like it. And if you have some experience about something related to this, please comment. It really helps to know what's resonating with people. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon.